Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Mike Carlson.
I'm Brian Heisenbach.
And this is The View from the U. Brian, big week of college football. Two SEC Titans going at it this week. Let's talk Mississippi State versus Alabama.
Let's talk Mississippi State, and let's first talk about Dak Prescott. The guy in the Mississippi State uniform. He's really been their Jameis Winston this year, and honestly, when I'm looking at this game, I really think he's the key. I think Mississippi State, just because of that Dak Prescott factor, they'll get around the Alabama defense.
Oh, I totally agree with you, Brian. And, we're just talking about this. The line right now, Alabama by 7.5 points. Alabama's at home. I don't think that Dak Prescott, being on the road is that much of a factor, let alone 7.5 points of a factor. I think if you're Dak Prescott, you want to win this game, you have to tune out the noise, take away that home field advantage, and if you're Mississippi State, at that point it's easy.
Yeah, Tuscaloosa didn't scare Johnny Manziel 2 years ago, and I really don't think Dak Prescott will be rattled. But Mike, let's talk a bit on game day signs. You and I love our game day signs, and since none of us can be in Tuscaloosa,
I'll be Doc!
For Dak Prescott himself, obviously Mississippi State, we're looking for them to come up big. I'm picking Mississippi State over Bama. Mike, you picking them too?
Oh, I'm for sure picking Mississippi State. I wouldn't be holding the sun if I wasn't picking Mississippi State, Brian. I'm thinking Mississippi State wins 31-24. It's a shootout, but it's going to come down to whoever has the ball last and whoever's defense plays better.
All right, let's move east to Athens, Georgia. Todd Gurley finally back. He's going to start in the game against Auburn. Big news for the Bulldogs, and it's really going to make it tough for a reeling Auburn team.
Yeah, exactly, and I think if you're Auburn, this is the worst possible thing that could have happened. Obviously, you didn't play well last week against Texas A&M. Now you have to face a Georgia team that has Todd Gurley back. This is the sum of all fears pretty much, Brian. If you are Gus Malzahn, this is not going to affect Georgia's playoff run at all because they're virtually out of it. A little bit of too little too late, but if you're Todd Gurley, it's a shot to up your draft stock a little bit.
So, Mike, let's talk about the college football playoff because, of course, we are filming on Thursday afternoon, so we don't have the CFP standings yet. But what we can look at are the four positions. And, Mike, one of the big things I brought up, especially with a big win in Arizona State, is that one of those four spots has to go to the Pac-12 champion.
Oh, I definitely agree, Brian. I think you look at Oregon and Arizona State. Those are the two teams. If there's going to be a Pac-12 team in that Final Four, it's going to be one of those two teams, but ultimately, Brian, I think it's Oregon. It's Oregon's to lose right now. They're going to have a spot when it comes down to it. I just don't think this ASU team can keep up with the speed and the pace of this Oregon offense.
Yeah, here's a question. Do you think the SEC should get one or two spots? Because obviously we should just call it the Florida State spot, make it easy on everyone. But we already have two fantastic SEC teams in right now with Mississippi State and Alabama, with TCU right on the edge. Do you think that, the SEC, let alone the SEC West, really carries, as big of a stick to nudge out that TCU team?
That's a tough question, Brian, but you bring up a great point. I think any other year, SEC, two spots. I'm looking at, your top two SEC teams, whether that's East and West or two teams from the West. I think those are the two spots. But because the SEC West has been so stacked this year, because everyone in the SEC has been playing well, because of the emergence of Mississippi State, because Auburn is still playing well, Alabama is still playing well, Ole Miss, because there are so many great teams and they've all cannibalized each other, Brian, I think there's only going to be one SEC spot, and I think the other spot goes to TCU. So I think when it all is said and done, you're looking at an SEC team, Florida State, TCU, and Oregon.
Right. Obviously, TCU needs to win out, and I think the best thing they can do for themselves is just to sit back and watch, because if Kansas State can upset Baylor, that gives them really an outright Big 12 lead and win out, they're fine. I'd say give them a 4 spot.
I would agree, Brian, but the 4 spot, that's going to be tough, but I think it'll be an interesting game to watch.
All right, let's move into rising and falling. Actually, no, before that, hold up. Skipping ahead a little, let's talk about Mr. Heisman right there.
The Heisman, Brian, I was a firm non-believer in Trayvon Boykin. I did not think this guy deserved to be a Heisman candidate. I was wrong. I'll fully admit that. Trayvon Boykin is a Heisman contender. This guy is playing well this year. He's winning the big games, with the exception of Baylor. That's not his fault. Defense didn't play well. I think right now Trayvon Boykin is in second place. I think he's tied for second with Mariota, Jameis Winston, and I think that's it, Brian. I think it's Dak Prescott and then those three guys, Boykin, Mariota, Winston.
Yeah, one of my really big objection with Trayvon Boykin is if we look into the history books here, just 1 year's past, we had a big Heisman race between Trey Mason, Jameis Winston, who's going to win, two very good players. But what ended up happening is that Jameis Winston won every game. Trey Mason, the Auburn Tigers, lost to LSU, big divisional opponent. And I think that, especially since Mariota and Prescott, such big candidates, I really don't think that loss is forgivable. of course, Oregon, well, it being that Oregon has that loss to Arizona and Prescott's still undefeated, I don't know. I feel like just because of that win and every single one of these candidates being so high up there that it's really his to lose right now.
I totally agree with you, Brian. It's Dak Prescott. He's been playing so well. If he wins all the big games, Dak Prescott will be your Heisman. I think he'll be a unanimous Heisman, actually, Brian. I don't think it'll be any kind of question besides that. But if, Marcus Mariota plays out of his mind these next couple weeks, throws up some huge numbers, he'll be in contention too. He'll be right there with Mr. Prescott.
Yeah, and almost shooting himself in the foot because Jameis Winston, of course, he's having an undefeated season. Of course, big win over Notre Dame, big win over, well, he didn't play in Clemson, but his team got a big win over Clemson. Just strike that from the record. But, there's really nothing that Jameis, I think, can do unless Dak or someone else starts losing games just because the strength of schedule for Florida State this season has just been low, and they're not going to finish out very strong.
It's been laughable, Brian. And when you look at it, you expect Winston to go 5 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. Have games where he throws multiple touchdowns, very little turnovers. He's still turning the ball over, not throwing as many touchdowns, not doing as much as you want him to do. So I think right now, if we're going to order him, if we're going to power rank, it goes Dak Prescott, Marcus Mariota, Trayvon Boykin, and then Jameis Winston rounding out your top 4.
All right, I agree. Now, let's move on to rising and falling stock. Let's change it a little around. Let's start with the positive. Let's start with the rising stock.
Brian, rising stock, Oregon Ducks. They're on fire right now. Everything is going well for them. Utah State, fumble, return at 99 yards. That's going well. Marcus Mariota's throwing great. He has the mastery of this offense. I love what I'm seeing. Oregon, smoking hot.
Oh yeah, I said it last week. That Stanford monkey finally off his back. I think Mariota's just set to explode right now. He's lethal. I agree with you. These guys definitely deserve a playoff spot, and I think that they have what it takes to beat a very talented Arizona State team. And really, it's all on Marcus Mariota's shoulders, and he's pulling the weight right now. He's doing a great job.
Exactly, and if we're moving from Pac-12 North to the Pac-12 South, not super stoked about this one, Brian. Arizona State, stock up. They're playing great football right now. We had Mike Bercovici. We have a lot of different quarterbacks throwing the ball. If you're Arizona State, the Sun Devils right now, white hot, and they're going to move up with the number 9. So they're going to move up from the number 9 spot this week.
Oh yeah, definitely. That loss to UCLA really means nothing. They're a completely different team than that team that got absolutely blown out, and I really hope the College Football Committee takes that into account when they release their rankings tonight. But, there's really no answer for this Arizona State team. They can beat you on offense, they can beat you on defense, maybe with a Hail Mary here or there, and that's really all she wrote for this Arizona State team, and it's just going to come down to them and Oregon in the Pac-12 championship.
Exactly, Brian. I have to agree, and now we got to move on. This one is especially for you. Georgia Tech, stock up.
Definitely. We talked last week about how we were a little doubtful because they haven't shown the consistency. One way to sort of downplay our doubts is to absolutely crush divisional rival NC State. They went out there, put on a clinic. Of course, their defense could use a little improvement, but not being picky, they had a big win over a team that almost beat Florida State. So, honestly, I'm all in right now. I was worried at the beginning of the season, but they've proved me wrong. They got a really well-rounded program down there in Atlanta.
Hey, great squad, Brian, and they're not going to win the ACC by any means. No. They'll compete later down the road, but Georgia Tech, great football program.
Post-Winston era.
Post-Winston era, they will compete. I firmly believe that. So we're going to move now to stock down. I might not even talk about this one, Brian. This hurts me. Hurts me deep down in my heart. Notre Dame, stock down, lost a heartbreaker. Actually, it wasn't even a heartbreaker. It was a blowout to Arizona State. Not playing well, Brian. It's turnovers that are going to kill you. You can't expect to lose the turnover battle and win a football game. Notre Dame turned the ball over 5+ times. Not a good day for the Irish.
Oh yeah, definitely. And again, this is sort of going back to all the team's weight being put on one guy's shoulders. Everett Golson, we know he's a fantastic quarterback. We know he's going to get drafted. I could see him doing well in the NFL. But when you have those bad games, when you start throwing interceptions, team starts having fumbles, stuff like that, turnovers left and right, pick sixes in a handful, then really what is left of the team? Everett Golson has been able to win those close games against teams like North Carolina because he's been that quarterback and he can provide the offense. But when he's turning the ball over and he can't really deliver that, can't win games.
Not a lot to do, Brian, and now we got to talk this one. Michigan State, stock way down after just getting whipped by an Ohio State team not led by Braxton Miller, but by J.T. Barrett. Got to give some love to J.T. Barrett. He's hucking the ball. Had a great game against Michigan State.
Yeah, as a Michigan fan, you don't like to see their star go down and polish up an even brighter star to lift up. We said it all. This guy's absolutely fantastic. He's throwing the ball well. He's really taken this Ohio State team into his own, and they're playing well. I mean, I don't know if the Big Ten deserves a spot in the playoff, but definitely high bowl.
Oh, exactly. I think they won't be. I don't think they will have that 4 spot or a 3 spot in the playoffs, Brian. But I do think they'll be right there. The highest bowl besides those 4 playoff spots. I think that's obviously a lock for an Ohio State or a Michigan State team. And finally, we got to go stock down to cleats. Brian, I didn't see it. Brief us on this play.
All right, seeing it live. Northwestern versus Michigan. Of course, I pull in for Northwestern. Northwestern gets a touchdown to bring the game to 1 point with 3 seconds left. They go for 2 because they've been absolutely dreadful versus Michigan in overtime in the past 2 years. So Trevor Siemian takes a snap, rolls out. There's a Michigan defender. Why don't we just fall down? Falling stock to Trevor Siemian's cleats. We got to get you guys some decent spikes, man. Of course, costing Northwestern the game. Obviously, any chance to be bowl eligible, and the hopes and dreams of alum and fans. So, with that, let's end it with shoutouts.
Shout out to Cool Signs. This is the coolest sign I've ever seen. If you're ever down in Tuscaloosa and you're watching, it's okay. Copy this sign. Just give us some credit. I want to see it on game day.
All right, and my shout-out's got to be to Joe Walker, not a filler name. I'm talking about Oregon Ducks Joe Walker, the guy who recovered the fumble on the 1-yard line after what would have been a 70-yard touchdown, ran it all the way back for Oregon to close out an absolute blowout win over Utah. So, Mike, with that, let's wrap it up. I'm Brian Heisenbo.
And I'm Mike Carlson, and this has been The View from the U. Call me Katy Perry. Hey, sports fans, if you like columns about sports,
then go online and check out my column or Mike's column. Links in the description. 4th and 18 by Brian Heisenbuttle.
The Short Game by Mike Carlson. Give it a look, ladies and gentlemen.